Vanakkam. Welcome to this course on classics in neuroscience. We have been looking at classic Nobel Prize winning works. In this series of videos, we are looking at the classic Nobel Prize winning contributions of Charles Sherrington. In this video, we will look at Sherrington's work on eye movement and attention, and Sherrington's work on emotion and pain, and Sherrington's work on the mind-body problem or the philosophical problem. Yes. Sherrington was interested in studying eye movements and how eye movements are controlled by the neural circuits within the brainstem. And Sherrington practically discovered the law of reciprocal innervation in eye muscles that suggested that when one eye muscle contracts, the antagonist of that muscle relaxes. This was a cornerstone in neurophysiology, a phenomenal contribution that when one muscle contracts, the opposing muscle, if it relaxes, it essentially means there is a smooth mechanical movement. Otherwise, what will happen is that there will be co-activation or co-contraction, which in many cases is a sign of pathology or old age, for example. He found that eye movements and reflexes are related to perception and attention. So, his work practically provided the path for performing modern eye tracking technology and eye tracking experiments, which is very widely used in neuroscience in today's world, and virtual reality, and in fields related to human computer interaction. Also, his work contributed in a big way to the study of disorders like crossed eyes, strabismus, and lazy eye or amblyopia. So, these were his major contributions in the field of eye movement and attention. The most important of these is the idea of reciprocal innervation that became a theme not just in eye muscles, but also in several other skeletal muscles. Unless there is reciprocal activation of muscles, there will be co-activation. Sometimes we intentionally do produce co-activation, that is a different topic. In the case where you are interested in only activating one muscle, this is almost never the case. You cannot almost never can you voluntarily activate a single muscle. That is a very difficult task by itself. But let us assume one can do that. If you can do that, then you almost never activate its antagonist. You relax the antagonist. This is very normal in healthy. This is the healthy typical case. Of course, as a person ages, the nature of this principle changes. There is a tendency to increase co-contraction because there is less confidence in what people do as they age. So, there is a tendency to increase the stiffness, the apparent stiffness of the joint, which is a very bigger topic for us to discuss. We will not get into that for this course. So, essentially through his studies of eye movements, Sherrington established this idea of reciprocal innervation and reciprocal inhibition. Sherrington also studied pain and emotion, and he was practically the first one to suggest that pain is not just a simple sensory experience, but is actually a very complex function of the brain, suggesting that pain processing involves both sensory aspects, sensory regions of the brain, and also emotional or the limbic circuits of the brain. This idea was later confirmed by functional MRI studies. Now, it is well established and accepted that pain perception and pain processing involves both the sensory and the emotional brain areas, suggesting that if you feel the pain, you feel emotional, but the converse is also true. If you feel emotional or sad, you may feel more pain, that you develop a higher sensitivity to pain, perhaps something of this sort. So, he also observed that strong emotions can influence pain perception. So, that is an early version of what we now call as the placebo effect. So, that you can feel more pain for the same input if you are in a painful emotional state, for example. That is, your sensitivity to pain changes as a function of your emotional state is a revolutionary idea to make in the early 1900s. Now, this is a well known and well accepted principle, but to say this in the early 1900s like Sherrington did was totally revolutionary. His ideas essentially challenged the original thought, which was pain is essentially a simple nerve stimulation and does not necessarily involve many brain circuits. And this essentially laid the groundwork for management of pain using cognitive behavioral therapy. So, that is, if you are feeling better, then your sensitivity to pain reduces. That way, there is a need for you to feel better and thus reduce your sensitivity to pain, thus the pain itself will reduce, and essentially also contributing to placebo controlled drug trials. Is the drug actually working? Is it working better than the placebo? If a drug is actually working only when it is working better than the placebo. If it is only working as well or as good as the placebo, then it is really not working. Sherrington also was interested in philosophy. He became deeply philosophical in his later years. So, he was interested in the nature of consciousness and became very philosophical and interested in philosophy. He wrote about the brain as the great or the grand integrator that turns separate sensory inputs into an experience. An experience cannot be described as a simple sensory perception. It is much more than sensory perception, it is much more than that. He speculated on whether consciousness is purely a brain activity and its process or product, or is it much more than that. This essentially foreshadowed what is today studies of consciousness or modern consciousness studies in cognitive neuroscience. He was one of the very few early neuroscientists who acknowledged that there are limits to studying materialism or studying the brain using the approach of materialism, which inspired later day thinkers like Roger Penrose and Christoph Koch. So, with this we come to the end of this video. In this video we looked at Sherrington's work on eye movements and attention, in particular his work on reciprocal innervation, which is an extraordinary contribution, and his work on pain and emotion, and specifically suggesting that painful stimuli essentially activate both the pain perception areas and also the limbic areas, which means that your sensitivity to pain perhaps can be modulated by the status of your emotional system. That if you are very sad, it is likely that you will feel more pain, for example, or the opposite. If you are very happy, the same stimulus might cause less pain because your sensitivity to pain is less. And his work on the mind body problem and in philosophy. With this we come to the end of this video. Thank you for your attention.